In my mid 30s, I suddenly would get strange chronic fatigue. I would feel tired all the time. And in the mornings, I would not be able to get up. It was so bad. And with two young kids, I thought, I'm going to croak. And then you go to the doctors and they said, no, we can't do anything. You're just feeling fatigued.
Hello, and welcome to the Big 4-0 podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie McLaughlin. In our 20s and 30s, we spend so much time and energy striving for success and checking all the boxes, but it's usually according to some outside authorities' standards or approval. Then, in the years around age 40, many of us start to redefine who we are, what success means, and what we want out of life. We learn to have more confidence in our own authority and experience, and our life adjusts accordingly. Or we ignore it all and deal with the repercussions of not evolving. It's not always a smooth process. I fought against the transition, which made getting through it a messier process than it had to be. On this podcast, I welcome you to tap into my stories and experience, as well as those of my guests, to help you make your way through your own transition and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes we made along the way. Today, my guest is Amita Sharma, who was completely surprised to find out that a bunch of weird and vague symptoms she was facing in her mid-30s was actually perimenopause. Nobody told her that the constellation of things she was dealing with could be taken together to signal the oncoming change in her physiology. She was so upset that, when the pandemic hit and she found herself with time on her hands, she began to research and vet holistic and naturopathic remedies, and then took her background in software to make that information available to other women. Hi, Amita. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Stephanie, I love the way you are creating this whole community of 40-something. I love the title of your podcast. I'm super excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to talk to you too, because here we are 100 and something episodes in. And honest to God, this is the first time that I've come across a really interesting perimenopause story. So for those of you who are listening now, I just sort of gave away the ghost there, but we've got a story here because people talk to me often and they say, perimenopause and menopause are such big things right now. Would you consider shifting your podcast to focus on that? And I've said, the transition that I'm looking at is, aside from perimenopause, although they can be sort of coincident and together, it's more of an internal, philosophical, mental, emotional transition versus the physical transition. But let's start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about who you were when you got to your mid-30s and how you became that person. What were your formative years like?
Yeah. So, mid-30s, I had my own business and I always used to have strange symptoms and never paid attention, to be honest with you. Yeah. So I had a lot of flexibility, my own business in creative home design, so to speak, before I hit the 40s. I always used holistic therapies, right? That was my go-to toolbox to fix myself, even in my mid-30s, is so saying. Yeah. And then, of course, the messy 40s I'll get to next.
Yeah. But tell me a little bit about how you became the person you were in your 30s. Tell me about your childhood. What were the forces that shaped you and who were you at that point in time?
Yeah, so my childhood was actually quite different than a normal woman that you would talk to. I went through boarding schools, military boarding schools.
Oh.
Yes. So that's what I said. It's very different because normally I don't see kids going to boarding schools in the United States, but this was back in India. And these were sort of like inheritance from Britishers, right? Yeah. And so I spent a lot of my teen years, actually all of my teen years pretty much, in boarding schools. And that shaped me quite a bit to learn the discipline, to have some kind of a structure, a regimented things, all those things that you can learn by going to a sports military academy. That's what it was. And you can imagine, the kind of pressure and the kind of discipline and the kind of structure these kind of academies put on you. And you go in and as a different person and you come out as God knows what, right?
Right. Yeah.
Be off the chart by the time you get out.
So it's interesting because you're exactly right. The military boarding school is not a common thing we run across here in the States, but I would hazard a guess that you could come out of that experience a couple of different ways.
Mhm.
And one would be with great confidence,
Mhm.
but you came out the opposite, right?
Not that I was not confident. I think I was not trying to voice my opinion. I was scared to voice my opinion.
Okay.
Let's put it this way.
Okay.
It's not that I did not know what to do. It was just, I think, the way I was brought up, and at that generation of women, the way they were brought up to keep your voice, to keep your opinion to yourself, right? Now,
Yes.
in boarding school, yes, we were, we could voice our opinion, but as soon as you step into the family sort of like walls, you had to behave differently. That whole experience went out of the window if you are within the commune of a family wall.
Right, because in that kind of community, inside the family unit, there are very clear roles and responsibilities and very strict roles as well.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So one way you're trying to empower girls, right? When I went to the boarding school, that
Right.
was the whole idea. But then when you step out in the real world, you are still expected to behave whatever the culture expects you to behave, how the women should behave, right? So
Oh,
it's a very contradictory kind of things, right? That if you can imagine someone like, in their early 20s going through, confused, a lot of confusion. At one point you think you can conquer the world, the other part, hey, you now, no, 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 you need to go get married, you need to go get the baby, the regular whatever the women are sort of like being subjected to in centuries above. So
right.
I think you get a lot of conflict and confusion, and you're kind of like, you don't know where you belong and who you are, and because now you were supposed to act in a certain way, and the same thing happened to me.
There's a lot of cognitive dissonance there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I just could not understand what was the point of me going to the boarding school military academy and getting all this, being independent, right? And
Yeah.
being able to do so many things. And now no, 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 forget about that. Let's go back to, I think that was the reason for me, sort of like a lack of, I should say, not able to voice my opinion. You
Yeah.
can say lack of confidence. You can
Yeah.
say lack of being sure about myself, who I am, and trying to fit into the new paradigm, so to speak. And
Yeah.
you are looked upon as rebellious, and that was not in my generation, in our generation of women, that was not considered good, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and unfortunately, nowadays, 20-year-olds, they get a good degree and that they can get a decent job. In those days, it wasn't like that. You didn't make a lot of money to support yourself. So there was this whole dependence on the family commune, and then you just shifted your mental thing into trying to do something to please others. And that's what I was trying to do, is to please everyone else within the family commune and never coming to terms with why they're not getting what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that brings us into your mid 20s. And then did you follow the very clear path for women in your culture? Did you get married? Did you have a baby? Did you check all the boxes?
Yeah, I had to, because the jobs were not as well paying. First of all, it was not very common for women to just, okay, I'm going to go live by myself the way young girls or women do now. They have so much independence and flexibility to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
that was not considered okay. That was not considered cool. Let's put it this way. That was considered like, oh, you're going to miss the boat of getting married.
Well, and it sounds like you needed to do those cultural things in order even to survive, right? If you're saying that the jobs that you could get weren't enough to sustain you, then you needed to either stay with your family or get married in order to have a roof over your head and food on the plate and things like that.
In a way, yes, but I did come at that time to this country, and I went to back to school, UC Berkeley. But what happened is I did architecture in my undergraduate, and so did I continue here. And then one thing led to another. The architects here in this country were also not being getting paid well. It was like a double, triple whammy, right? So here you are thinking that, okay, now I can get out of this mess of this family commune, try to make a life of my own. And I graduated from Berkeley, and the best job I could get was like $15 an hour. And I'm serious. So I struggled. Then I had to struggle with that for a few years, trying to make a sense of what is happening. So, I'm barely in my mid 20s and I'm going
Yeah.
through this. So it was very tough for me. 20s were very tough, early 30s were very tough. I had to end up going back to school again, get an engineering degree, because I wanted to be independent, financially independent. I didn't want to be here working so hard and not making enough money to, it was not about architecture. It was, but if that
Right.
not paying the bills, what can you do? So I ended up going back and then getting back into the software part of it, in the technology part, learning about it. I had a small baby at that time, 1 year old. So it was tough. 20s and 30s were very, very tough. I should say that because of getting myself re-educated, trying to raise two
Yeah.
babies, plus putting yourself out there. Not an easy task, right? For anyone. It doesn't matter which culture you come from.
Right, right. No,
You
it's a
know?
lot of work. It's a lot
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah.
And very much, again, no matter which culture you come from, you were very much head down, nose to the grindstone, doing all the things you were supposed to be doing, checking the boxes.
Yeah.
So now we get into your mid 30s and things start getting funky with your body. Tell
Mhm.
me about that.
Yeah, so I suddenly, in my mid 30s, I would get strange chronic fatigue. That is the
Mhm.
correct word now that I know what is the correct word. So I would feel tired all the time. And in the mornings, I would not be able to get up. It was so bad. And, with two young kids, I thought, I'm not going to last. I'm going to croak.
Yeah.
So I tried to get my life insurance done. They said, no, we're not going to insure you because you have your high lipid levels and you might not live beyond a certain age. I'm like, what? So you can imagine that whole thing. And then you go to the doctors and they said, no, we can't do anything. You're just feeling fatigued. You could take some medications, injections, and don't want to be on that kind of a rocky road with the medical injections to just sustain me. So this is what went on after all these things of before. So I started very seriously looking into the holistic lifestyle at that time. That was a turning point for me. I
Hmm.
said, you know what? I don't want to be on medication because I always had side effects. I could never get rid of side effects, even when I was younger. And so, what can I do? So, I started learning about Ayurveda. I started learning about natural medicine. I started learning about exercise. Exercise I knew because
Hmm.
I went to the boarding school, right? So, diet and exercise was huge when that came handy. So,
Yeah.
I went back to my roots as to what kept me going during those years of when the diet and nutrition was so important for us to keep functioning. I went back to that and I started slowly fixing myself. And sure enough, after that, of course, the perimenopause story starts. But
Right.
that's kind of what's got me into the holistic part of it, is my personal fatigue, which was completely like mysterious to all the doctors that I went to, and they said, we don't know what to do with you.
Yeah.
you know
I do know, actually. I struggle with fatigue myself, and
oh, yeah.
nobody knows what to do with me. So I know exactly what you're
Yeah.
saying. It's very frustrating.
Hmm.
So you're already not in perfect health. Things aren't going perfectly smoothly with your body.
Hmm.
And then you start getting these symptoms that you don't know are actually symptoms. How did they start?
So, yeah, so the perimenopause symptoms started with my hot flashes sitting in meetings. By the time I had graduated myself to work in a corporate world, and I was making decent money, right? So I was able to work all through. And now this suddenly hot flashes started in meetings. And then my flow was like crazy. It would be irregular, of course, but then
Hmm.
suddenly it would be like a tap has been opened and you can't do anything. It was so bad,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought it was the consequence of my fatigue, the chronic fatigue that's what occurred to me.
Right.
It's because of that, I'm having all these issues. And then the brain fog. Now I know what was happening. I can tell you. So at night again, I'll be sweating like, night sweats, obviously. And then the morning I would be groggy because I haven't been able to sleep properly. And then I would not be able to focus at work. And my work was suffering productivity. And like you said, the perimenopause is not only about physical symptoms, it is like you're emotional, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like a nervous wreck here. My mood swings are going up and down. My work is getting impacted. I'm not able to focus. And so suddenly this whole thing started, and I had no clue I was going through perimenopause. And I
Right.
go to the doctor. Well, I did not see a OBGYN. There's a nurse practitioner, how they do with your pap smear and stuff like that. They didn't say anything. So no, everything is normal. So I'm having all these things. And nobody uttered a single word called perimenopause or hormone fluctuation or whatever. Hey, maybe you get your hormone tested or something
Yeah.
is going on. It was so frustrating. And that's what I was going through. Oh my God.
Yeah. And the frustration too is people are telling you that everything is normal,
Yeah.
and you're living in this meat suit saying, this isn't normal. I
Yeah.
used to be a healthy, vibrant person, and now all of a sudden, just getting out of bed is a struggle, and
Yeah.
remembering the grocery list is a struggle, and focusing on the project at work is a struggle. And when they tell you everything's normal, you think, well, then I must be crazy.
Yeah, because now I look at my mental condition during those years, I was not normal. I'm telling you. You start having lack of confidence, right? Your self-esteem goes down. You're thinking something is wrong with you. You're not able to be coherent when you're talking to anyone. You're not able to concentrate. All those things, right? Now things have come so much better. Now we are talking about this.
Yes.
At that time I thought, who should I go talk to? and
Right.
i and I was like honestly scared because I thought people might judge me if I go
Mhm.
and talk to anyone, right?
Mhm.
People could think, oh, you can do your work, okay, there are 10 people standing in line who's ready to take your job.
Right.
And high tech industry, yes, it is well paying, but on the other hand, it's like it's gruesome, right?
It's
In the
cutthroat. Yeah.
very cutthroat industry. You have to be on the go all the time to survive in that, because technology is changing like every single day here. It's so crazy.
Yeah. In that industry, it's, I would assume that it's productivity over humanity.
It is.
Yeah.
So you what do you do? You try to make sure you kind of somehow survive, but all these symptoms and all these things are just engulfing you. And so
How
I
how old were you at this time, Amita? How
40s. It was 40s. It was early 40s.
early 40s.
Yeah.
So earlier than we are generally thought to understand that this begins. We usually think this begins in the late 40s
Yeah.
and it only lasts a couple of years. And there used to be very little discussion of it. I don't even remember the word perimenopause when I was, a young person. It was like you're normal and then you go through menopause and then you're done, right? It's only in the last 5 or 6 years that women have really picked up the mantle and started talking about this and educating, and that there's been more research into how a woman's body evolves, through these later decades. So I can imagine that you felt really quite adrift and alone during all of this. I do have a question though. Tell me, you're in the, and I'm painting a picture. You're in a tech industry, software, out on the West Coast. For all of us, we have this vision in our heads of what that looks like, right? Because it's such a well-known industry. Tell me what it's like getting a hot flash in the middle of a boardroom meeting. Like, what does that look like? What is that experience like? What kind of reactions did you get from people? Really bring that to life for me.
Oh my God. So you're sitting in a meeting, predominantly talking to engineers who are men, right?
Yes, yes.
Majority of them are men. And suddenly you are sweating. You start sweating your face. And if you can imagine the sweat dripping,
Dripping.
literally dripping. I'm not exaggerating this point. And then people are looking at you and you're talking and suddenly it starts and you put a tissue and then again it drips, right? Your whole meeting gets disrupted because now you cannot just sit there dripping and talking at the same time, whatever you're supposed to present or talk. You have to step out to calm yourself or do so, right? So this happened multiple times with me. And one time was in an interview, a younger woman was interviewing me and suddenly I started dripping and she paused and she thought I could not do the work at all. And they obviously rejected me and I had no clue what was going on. Seriously. I mean, I'm sure she was baffled the same way I was.
Right. Especially if she
Right?
was younger than you. Yeah.
She
Yeah.
was. She was a younger person. I know, just whatever. So it was so disruptive to a point that I actually literally I said I cannot function. My mind is going to go crazy if I continue like this.
Hi. We'll get back to the conversation in just a minute. We are about halfway through this examination of midlife transition. And this podcast is as much about your midlife journey as it is about mine or Amita's. So let's make this conversation go both ways. I would love to hear your thoughts or your own transition stories. What have you run across? How are you managing the onset of what I call the ick? And what do you wish you knew about getting through it? Drop me a message on my website, thebig40.com, and spell out all those words. There's no numbers. I'll also put contact details in the show notes. All right, back to the show.
I ended up quitting my full-time job. And then I started going into consulting companies so that I could pause after 5 o'clock. I am not required or I am not expected to work. Right. So I actually, there's a lot of data that talks about women quitting and women letting go of their ladders, whichever ladder we have to climb. So I actually ended up doing that because I thought, oh, I know this work. I really enjoy it. I could, go up the ladders and become whatever. At that time, you think, oh, you're going to become a VP of product or whatever, right? That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So here I am quitting and going back to becoming a consultant, a contractor, actually.
Yeah.
And then so that I can just take pauses, in the sense between my contracts, and then I can only work 9 to 5, 8 hours. And now I'm letting go of my dream of going up what I thought I could do at that time and become an important person, so to speak, within a high-tech organization, but it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. So, yeah, and you're right. Certainly, there's a lot of evidence in the conversations that I've had, the interviews that I've done on this show, of people, and especially women, leaving their chosen career or their job at some point during this time. And often you hear that what happens is that women get to a point where they've done all the hard work and they've checked all the boxes and they've been such a good girl and worked so hard and, done all the right things. And then they get to that perch on the corporate ladder that's medium high towards the top and they go, what? Is this it?
Yeah.
This blows. I don't want to be here. I did all that work and this is all I got. So there's a realization of it not being as fulfilling or as satisfying as they had thought it would be once they achieved that level. And so you're coming at it from a bit of a different angle. You're saying, not because I don't have the skill or the knowledge or the expertise, but functionally, I just cannot perform at that level right now. P.S. Nor do I really want to.
Yeah, because exactly, you're absolutely right. It's not the money at that time, right? It's the fulfillment.
Yeah.
Because by the time, your kids are grown up, in my case, that's what happened. And they're teenagers, but because if you have your kids in 20s, they're going to become teenagers. By the time you're in your late 40s and then you're in college and going whatever. So the money is not the only thing at that time. It's more like making an impact, of fulfillment. And when you get out of the house, you want to feel wanted. You want to have your voice heard. You don't want to be invisible, so to speak, right?
Right.
So all these feelings.
Yes, and your role too, and I didn't have children, but your role as a mom is also changing, right? Because if they're teenagers while you're in your 40s, they need so much less from you and they're so much less dependent on you, and what they do need is very different. So there's that identity piece too that starts shifting of I'm no longer the mom of little babies who need me
Yeah.
all the time, right? So yeah, there's just so much shifting in the landscape here that it really does do a number on us during this period in time. And just going back to the work thing, it's I'm thinking of the West Coast high tech industry. It's such a boys club, and I'm guessing for you it's like, who wants to play by their rules anymore? Who wants to work 16 hours a day for some dude that doesn't even care? You know, like you said, there's 12 people behind you ready to sit in your
Yeah.
seat. It's just so demoralizing and dehumanizing. Okay, so you quit your job and you started to do consulting, and then I think COVID hits. Is that right?
Yes. So it's a strange thing, blessing in disguise, because
Yeah.
everybody was home.
Yep.
And my contract just so happened ended at the same time in December of 2019,
Yep.
because the company was moving to Colorado and all those things happened. And I had a job lined up, and I had to travel outside the country. I came back and I said, I'll join you after I come back. And the COVID hits literally 2 weeks after I come back, right? And when everything was shut down in March, I still remember that. And these guys are saying, oh, no, 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 let's just put things on hold because we don't know what the heck. Like, we don't want to bring a new person on board
Right.
working remote. That was not the fashion, right?
Yeah,
Right.
not at the beginning.
It was, it was no, we want you in the office, meeting with the team and all that kind of stuff. So I said, okay, fine. And then it was on hold like for a long time because nobody knew what the heck was happening.
Yeah.
So that's the time when I said, "Oh, what am I supposed to do? I can't keep waiting for this gig to come." And nobody was hiring at that time, if you remember.
I
Uh,
do.
2020, everybody put a just complete stop.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started looking into holistic medicine or holistic therapies, I should say. Not for me. I had fixed myself quite a bit. I was functioning fine. My
Yep.
health, my health, physical, mental, emotional, was in pretty good shape actually at that time in 2020. And then I said, I've gone through all this. Why don't I just start digging a little bit into this and seeing if there's an evidence?
Yeah.
So I wanted to see, because this was all hocus pocus, right? What I used to do before.
Yes.
Sometimes I do this, sometimes I do this, and somehow I'll get fixed.
Right.
And so then I started talking to holistic experts, exploring into this field, so to speak, around the world. And I said, let me start gathering evidence. And I started asking them, do you have any case studies, like positive case studies that people have had positive outcomes using what you're doing, whether it's a naturopathy, whether it's acupuncture, Ayurveda, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I talked to 3,000 different experts and I told them, I need your case studies, right? Show me a proof that whatever you're doing has actually made a positive impact or an
Yep.
outcome has been positive. So we started with that. This NourishDoc is collecting case studies, believe it or not, from all the experts all over the world. And it was not necessarily menopause only, it was
Okay.
just holistic therapies. Do they
Okay.
work or not? My first question was, does it work? Do they work? Does it have evidence? Does it have any research? So we started collecting case studies and collecting research evidence, basically.
Okay. And at this point, your goal was what? Did you have a goal in mind, or were you just kind of following your gut and just collecting to see what you were going to find?
I did not know. It
Okay.
was just going through the gut
Okay.
because this had worked for me. I said, let me try to put it in a structure. If
Yeah.
there is anything in it, which I have no idea if there is or not. And then my goal was to really see if it takes me somewhere, or should I go back to my consulting after things settle down.
Yep.
So,
Yep. So this was sort of a passion project that you had the capacity to do because the world was kind of shut down.
yeah,
And I'm guessing that you were getting positive feedback from all these providers because their worlds were also shut down. So why the heck not answer this question, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was so easy for me to talk to anyone I wanted because everybody was sitting home, and you tell them,
Yeah.
okay, I need to interview you, or I need to talk to you, and I need this. So
Yeah.
I got like such an amazing feedback and collected everything that I could think of. And then my whole world opened up, this whole world of integrative medicine, so to speak, alternative medicine.
Yeah.
I went to a lot of conference, lot of local meetups here with functional medicine doctors. They would have it every month. So I became sort of like every month I'll go all around the Bay Area and start interacting with them and learning, right? First job was to learn
Yeah.
what is it they're talking about. And then when I heard some of the MDs talk about the dysfunctional conventional medicine system that we have in this country, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I, I was completely shocked because I come from a family of doctors, and how they never talked about this side of medicine. And
Yeah.
here I am in Bay Area, all they're talking about is, oh my God, conventional medicine is so lame, and functional medicine and integrative medicine, all these buzzwords were coming out.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of learning for me because I had to learn for me to say, yes, this is what I can do.
Yeah.
2 years, I just went around and I learned about all these things, talking to a lot of experts. So I think by the time 2022 hit, then I knew that there's something in it. It's worth going deeper
Yeah.
and the next step.
And I think you said to me before that you learned, this is not going to be a surprise to anybody who's listening, that there's very little attention spent, very little research done on women's health after their reproductive years.
Yeah.
But if I remember, you said that you found that many or some chronic conditions were a result of lack of care in those post-reproductive years. Did I get that right?
Yes. Like I said, I spent a lot of time on research and talking all kind of medical experts you can think of. So as I was talking to all these experts, at that time I did not know I'm going to get into menopause, perimenopause, but I still remember I interviewed an expert here. She was in Texas, and she talked about all these numbers, that how so many millions of American women are going to live longer, and how more than two-thirds of their life now is going to be spent in menopausal, perimenopausal, right? And I was shocked by the stats. And then she brought out the fact that not much is known about it. Nobody talks about it. So that was my turning point. Also, I did not know the word perimenopause, believe it or not.
Okay. So where did you come across the word perimenopause? Because at this point, I'm thinking you've spent 2 years of very significant research into these natural therapies and integrative and functional medicine, all of which I'm very familiar with. So where did you come across perimenopause, and when did it lift the veil and realize that's what you had been going through years earlier when you were in that job?
Yeah, so I thought I'm going to take the holistic therapies and focus on the chronic condition.
Yep.
That was the initial idea. So first 2 years, that's all we were doing, right? Collecting the data and the case studies and for diabetes and all kind of things you can think of. During one of the interviews that I was talking to my medical expert, and the topic was women's wellness, she said, "Oh, I want to talk about menopause." I said, "Okay, go ahead." I knew about menopause, and then she started talking about how at different stages of menopause and what happens in perimenopause, and then how the female sex hormones, the first hormone goes down. I was like, oh my God. When she was talking, I'm interviewing her, I said, this is exactly what was happening to me. And
Yeah.
I said, how come nobody knows the word perimenopause? She says, well, we don't talk about it. We are not taught in medical school. She said that.
Wow.
I'm like, you're going to be kidding me. She said, no, we are not taught about perimenopause in medical schools, and only 8 hours are devoted to the topic of menopause.
I know.
How-
Isn't
how
that
the-
insane?
yeah.
We represent 50% of the population, and anybody who lives to that age is going to go through this. 100% of us are going to go through this. And you're right, they spend 8 hours. Oh my God. It is.
Can you believe that? So I was shocked. She said, you know what you're doing every single day. I see you're interviewing, you're doing all these things, you're doing an amazing job. And what are you focusing on? I said, I think I'm trying to focus on chronic conditions. So I have to be thankful to that expert. She said, you know what? More women, 80% of us after 55 are going to have chronic condition. More women have diabetes, osteoporosis, dementia, heart condition, and breast cancer than men. And he says nobody's done the research, but if you put two and two together, this whole journey, which nobody knows about it, all these lack of care is directly responsible for your postmenopausal years of chronic condition. And now you're trying to spend trillions of dollars.
Trillions.
Yeah, not billions, trillions. And nobody's paying attention to the root cause right here. So then I started digging really like a crazy person in 2023. I said, I got to start digging into this perimenopause, menopause. And the more I dig into it, I started realizing, oh my God, this is crazy. It's unbelievable. It's not just your menstrual health switching off. It's like all these things that we are not really talking about it. We don't have enough research. We haven't put it together the way it should be looked at. It's not just physical, it's emotional, all those things. So last 2 years, all perimenopause, menopause, I said, we're going to go into this and work on this problem because this problem needs to be worked on and needs to be spoken about, needs to have a voice.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm glad that there is a blooming of conversation and discussion around this topic because to your point, this can start in your early 30s and most women don't have any sense that the exhaustion they're feeling or the putting the keys in the freezer or the things that they might associate with, oh, I had that when I was pregnant or whatever. We don't associate them. And the complaints, many of them, are so vague.
Yes.
And are so difficult to pin down or pinpoint or treat or solve that I agree. This is one of my major complaints with the medical system is that, you go to a doctor and they look at the thing that they're trained to look at. And they don't look holistically, they don't look systemically. And so that's where those integrative doctors and functional medicine doctors, but you're out on the West Coast. I can't believe there are meetups because over here, I'm about an hour north of Boston and I can't find a functional medicine doctor unless I go into Boston. I mean, it's just not that common yet, this spread of this discipline. So it's challenging.
It is. And then I think I interviewed a lot of naturopathic doctors. They are so knowledgeable.
They are.
And so, oh my God, they're amazing, especially in Canada. I must say that because I think over there, it's legal. But in this country, naturopathic doctors can only practice in 20 states, something like that. It might be clashing with the MDs who are, the functional, so they don't want to create that. So that's the problem. The system here, not that I want to blame medical doctors, but it's the system allows them to put only 7 minutes to a patient and they're like going from one door to another door with the chart, and humanly it's not possible for them to concentrate so much within 7 minutes. What can they detect in 7 minutes? So, and then they go to the other. The system is put them in such a high pressure environment.
I agree. And it's interesting that you talk about naturopathic doctors because I have relied on naturopathic doctors for many years because I have a handful of chronic conditions that I'm managing. And they're the only ones that A, believe me, and B, will look systemically and try different things. But to be honest, it's a real expensive hobby. That's where my discretionary income goes. It goes to these naturopathic doctors. It goes to some of these more natural therapies. It goes to the supplements that keep me up and boosted. So yeah, it is challenging. But tell me this. So you've done all this research into menopause and perimenopause, and you've chosen this as an area of focus. I'm going to infer here that many of your personal issues, you said you were feeling better, you felt better physically, emotionally, mentally. So where do you go with this information? What is next?
So like you said, it's an expensive hobby, right? I found that also in my journey, right? Thousands of dollars, you keep testing, you do this, you do that. So what I really want to achieve is that I want to make the credible information super cheap, like $5-10 a month, right? Women should have the data. Women should have the information, the pump, credible information that they know this is what's going to happen. These are the options. These are the self-care techniques that they can try if they want to. I'm not
Yeah.
saying everyone is the same way. And these are the tests. These are the herbal supplements that are good for. So what we are doing is NourishDoc is going to present this entire information, the entire education, the entire go-to steps for holistic therapies in a very affordable way, right? So that's the first step.
Okay. So you're hoping to become a bit of a clearinghouse, a bit of an education center for women to go and find that information.
Yeah. So first
Okay.
step is that because we all spend months and months. And then the second step is if you need to get to the naturopathic doctor, we are going to have a network of all the experts as well who are
Mm.
vetted by us, right?
Mm-hmm.
I personally have spoken to each one of them. If I have not talked to them personally, they are not on our platform,
Mm.
right? That way. So you have a experts, and then initially, rather than spending $250 an hour, which most of them charge,
Mm-hmm.
I told you so many, 3,000 of them. I have convinced almost everyone to do a group kind of a thing where it is affordable, right? Where they can offer some different programs in a group setting so that women can learn. And then if someone needs the one on one, they have the ability through our platform to go one on one, which we are going to negotiate the rates as well so that they are more accessible. So that's really what we are trying to address all these in a way that women feel supported.
Yeah.
At the same time, the experts are accessible and hopefully affordable so that women can get correct information and connect to the experts and still benefit
Yeah.
from this whole path if they don't want to go with the conventional medicine. Come.
Right, right. And so this is all being developed into a software platform. So some of your background in tech is kind of coming in handy here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
This is all being developed, and we hope to launch it early next year.
Okay.
So that's what we are working on right now. I personally, again, vetted almost 300, 400 experts who will be on the platform initially to get going, and then we'll slowly start opening it up to other professionals. But initially, that's how it works.
Great. Great. And that platform is called NourishDoc, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, Amita, I am so happy to have met you and really been able to shine a spotlight on this very important topic today. Like I said, this is the first time really diving into perimenopause, but I'm sure it won't be my last since it is such a common experience that we all go through. Yeah.
This is definitely not the last. I would love to partner and collaborate with you in future. I think you're doing such an amazing work trying to bring these stories out and help other women. So I'm actually really excited when this thing comes out. Yes.
Oh, that's great. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening today. I love not only what Amita is doing, but also how she came to it. It is a recurring theme in these conversations that what people are doing and what my friend and former guest Shannon Russell calls their second act many times comes from solving a problem they faced and wish they had an easy solution for. It's why the experience of the first part of our lives is so important. I also did an interview today with another guest you'll hear from in a couple of weeks who said that he used the skills he developed in his career to build the project he was inspired to take on. So even though you may shift gears or change course professionally, keep in mind that everything you learned in your first act becomes the bedrock that your second act is built on. And this is so important to really point out, especially for anyone who feels like they might be starting over in midlife or might even want to. One of the most powerful undercurrents in Amita's story is how her current project, NourishDoc, isn't really a departure from her past. It's a culmination of it. Amita spent years in the high stakes world of tech and product development. She honed her skills in research, in systems thinking, user experience, software engineering, all while navigating complex, usually male dominated corporate environments. And at the time, she might have felt like those years were just about surviving or checking the boxes. But now, those very skills are the foundation of her life's most meaningful work. Building a tech enabled platform to support women's health? That is classic Amita. Systems driven, user focused, and deeply personal. She's applying her tech know-how to make holistic health more accessible, her research instincts to vet experts and therapies, and her firsthand experience to shape something that meets women exactly where they are. So if you feel like you might want to make a shift, but you worry that you'll have to leave your skills and experiences behind, Amita's story really demonstrates that it's just the opposite. Midlife reinvention isn't about abandoning your past. It's about integrating it in a new and purposeful way. And that brings me to something else that so many of us grapple with in midlife, especially professionally, and that is redefining success. In the early decades of our career, success is measured by titles and paychecks and promotions and all of those visible external markers that tell us we're doing it quote unquote right. But at some point, and especially as our bodies change and our energies shift and our priorities evolve, we start to ask, is this it? Is this what I worked so hard for? I hear this over and over again. People shift from achievement mode to alignment mode. And midlife becomes a turning point where the work we do needs to mean something, not just to meet external expectations. And Amita reached that moment too. After all the striving, all the grinding, all the ladder climbing, all the long hours, she hit pause. Not because she couldn't keep going, but because she realized she didn't want to. And that decision gave her the freedom to pursue work that was not only more sustainable for her well-being, but far more fulfilling as well. Success in midlife isn't about reaching the top of someone else's ladder. It's about building your own ladder. And that's a really important takeaway for today. Success in midlife looks different than it did in our 20s and 30s. Many of us reach a point where we realize we've been climbing the wrong ladder or sacrificing our well-being for a career that no longer fits us or fulfills us. And we wonder why we're even doing it. So if you're starting to get this itch, like the job or career you have no longer fits you, it is not something to ignore. It doesn't always mean blowing up your life. For some people, it could just be a shift within a company or an industry. But for others, it does mean starting fresh. But what looks good on paper isn't necessarily meaningful to you individually, and that becomes more important as you age. There's another topic from today's conversation that I want to mention, but I'm not going to go too far into it or I will get too angry. The medical gaslighting of women, especially in midlife. One of the most frustrating aspects of Amita's story is how often she was dismissed by doctors who told her everything was normal while she was clearly struggling. I have been through this personally, and it's incredibly common for women in midlife, especially when it comes to perimenopause and other hormonal shifts that show up in vague and gauzy ways in our health, something that's not acute or easy to pin down. Many of our doctors are not trained to recognize or treat these symptoms effectively, leaving us feeling unheard and unsupported. And let's not even talk about how a physiological transition that 100% of 50% of the population goes through is covered in 8 freaking hours of medical school. So let me just end by saying that it is important for you to advocate for yourself and to shop around until you find a doctor or nurse practitioner who is willing to listen to you and take you seriously. And that may mean stepping outside the traditional medical community into the alternative and naturopathic world, which will hopefully get a little easier as Amita's natural health platform becomes more robust over time. All right, next week, you are going to meet Steve Vincent, who was 40 when he heard the whispers, "Is this all there is?" He was safe and secure in a role as a high school vice principal, which he hated. He had followed the model his parents gave him: go to school, get a good job, and everything's going to be fine. Except everything wasn't fine. He had to be brave enough and honest enough to acknowledge that mom and dad were wrong, he wasn't happy, and he didn't feel safe. So, despite a mortgage and 4 kids to take care of, he made a leap that took him into the business world. I'll see you next time. The Big 4 podcast is produced and presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications.